I know in this brave new Australia we're all supposed to move forward, but I'm going to disappoint you and look back to the famous meeting in Kevin Rudd's office the night before you became Prime Minister. Can I ask you, is it true that Mr Rudd told you that night that he was working towards an October election because he knew issues like climate change needed to be sorted out? Is it true that Mr Rudd indicated to you that if closer to the election, polling showed that he was an impediment to the re-election of the government, and if leading Labor figures such as John Faulkner agreed that he was an impediment, that he would then voluntarily stand aside and hand over the leadership to you before the election? Is it also true that you agreed that this offer was sensible and responsible? Is it true that there was then a brief break during which Mr Rudd went outside and briefed a couple of colleagues on what he thought was a deal while you contacted your backers, and that when the meeting resumed, you said you'd changed your mind, you'd been informed that he didn't have the numbers in caucus and you're going to challenge anyway?
Julia Gillard initially used humour to try to diffuse the issue.
Some special things obviously happen when you become Prime Minister, one of which is that the great Laurie Oakes comes to your National Press Club addresses, so I thank you for that. That's never happened to me in my life before.
But then she refused point blank to answer the questions, said in fact she never would.
I'm going to disappoint you by not looking back. I've made it very, very clear that I will never be speaking publicly about my discussions with Kevin Rudd on that night. I think that's an appropriate mark of respect between colleagues, so it's not my intention to canvass any of the matters that were discussed in that room. I'm not going to do it by playing a rule-in, rule-out game. I'm not going to do it in any way, shape or form.
A pretty easy way out?
Well, Laurie, it's a decision I took immediately after emerging from that room. We went into that discussion on the basis that it was a confidential discussion between colleagues, and I intend to respect that confidence for the rest of my life.
The only other person at that meeting between Ms Gillard and Mr Rudd on the night of June 23rd was Defence Minister John Faulkner, acting as an honest broker, and he says his lips are sealed. Ms Gillard arranged today's National Press Club appearance so she could set out her economic management credentials before rushing to an election.
All commitments we make will be fully costed and funded.
But the way she got the Prime Minister's job is still an issue, as the opposition leader made clear this afternoon.
The Prime Minister has a bit of explaining to do about what her exact role in the events of that night were.
Mr Rudd is in New York, where he's held talks with United Nations Secretary-General Ban Ki-moon.